Ladies and gentlemen, our first story of today, breaking news, is taking us to Maine. Mills Mafia is down. Janet Mills, Pills Mafia, the Pill Mill, Janet series. Unfortunately, we have lost the candidate that we put all of our effort into, the candidate that we knew had not been a four-tour machine gunner, Marine Corps grunt, Janet Mills, who, of course, was the ethical choice in this race for all the blue sky liberals and for all the ultra-left Maoist third worldists who actually don't even live in the United States of America in many instances, or certainly think voting is the most reactionary, counter-revolutionary thing you can do. The candidate for all of those people in the Democratic primary for the Senate seat that is currently occupied by Susan Collins was Janet Mills. But unfortunately, Janet Mills is down. Let's take a look.
This is new to our newsroom, too. We have not yet heard anything from any other campaign regarding her dropout, but just getting into into our newsroom in the last 2 minutes.
That's right. Yeah, we're just learning about this. We are reaching out in real time right now to the Graham Plattner campaign, as well as the Susan Collins campaign, for comment on this. This was not an announcement, at least that most political observers were anticipating would come today. These two had not met on a debate stage. The governor, of course, was actively campaigning. She was holding a series of events at different locations and
yeah, it wasn't a lack of funds. Let's be real. I mean, that would be an even more devastating story, ironically enough, because that would imply that the DSCC has no motion whatsoever and they don't have the coffers to go against a disruptor that is an outsider in every way, shape, and form. That was initially backed by the independent senator from Vermont, Bernard Sanders. So the idea that, like, the Democratic Party can't even cast aside or can't even secure funds to oppose a primary challenger coming from their left flank with totally independent funding is an even worse story, if we're being real, than the fact that Janet Mills, as the governor of the state, did not have enough genuine enthusiasm backing her campaign. And that's precisely what took place here. Now, the Janet Mills Graham Plattner race is an unbelievably important primary. As you guys know, I've covered it extensively. I've talked about it extensively. The reason why it's an unbelievably important primary is because it's one of the few instances where the centrist, corporate-backed Democratic Party power center totally underestimated the opposition and thought, oh, we'll just front-load a lot of AIPAC dollars to this decrepit governor of the state, and it'll be an easy lock. There's no way that an outsider could potentially coast to an easy victory, let alone 10, if not 10 plus points over Janet Mills in the primary, right? There's no shot. They were wrong. They were wrong. They were unbelievably wrong, as a matter of fact. Graham Plattner is now secured the primary victory for the Democratic Party, so now he can focus on unseating Susan Collins. Here's the thing. This is a very important story for multiple reasons, right? As I said, this shows that a lot of the white voting bloc in this party, even in purple states like Maine, or even in states that will be inevitably voting for a Republican seat to unseat and flip a Republican seat with Susan Collins, are no longer abiding by the old standard of electability favoring moderates arguments. They no longer believe that you have to pivot to the center. They no longer have the power centers of the party, no longer have the stranglehold, the vice grip that they have had over some of the most active voters in the party. This is a huge deal because the primaries are what dictate the future of the Democratic Party, and the general is what dictates the future of the country. But in many respects, for far too long, we on the left flank have not been active in these primaries, right? With some exceptions, some notable exceptions like Bernard Sanders. But we have not been active in the Democratic Party's primary systems all around the country. And on top of that, it's been a very hard hill to climb for many outsider candidates, left flank candidates, because the establishment has been able to control the electability arguments over and over again in perpetuity, constantly claiming the left flank candidates are not electable. You mustn't vote for them. You must vote for who we tell you to vote for. And that's what the centrists have been able to accomplish over and over again all around the country, lying to the base of support, claiming that the best possible candidate to vote for is the one that we tell you is most likely to defeat the Republicans. The centrist establishment Democrats have been able to basically educate their voter base into a pliant base of support for centrist Democrats, constantly telling them you have to vote like a DNC consultant and not vote for who you think is the best possible candidate. Vote for who you associate with closely. They've been able to successfully put the fear of God in many Democratic Party primary voters and have been able to successfully teach them for not who you think is the best, but vote for who you think others consider to be the most electable. But of course, defeat after defeat after defeat, specifically with Kamala Harris, against the same incompetent fascists once again. Many in the Democratic Party realized perhaps that this method was bullshit. They realized it. So many people said, perhaps Bernie was right. Perhaps we were wrong. That in 2016, Bernie could have defeated Donald Trump. In 2020, Bernie would have been a better candidate than Joe Biden. And here we are. Many former Clinton heads that have been lifelong Democratic Party boosters, donors, supporters have realized that Graham Plattner is a far more viable option, a far better choice to vote for. So we're doing away with the old method of operating with what some people like to call pundit brain. We're doing away with the old method of not voting for who we want, but voting for who we think others would likely vote for. And that's what Graham Plattner has demonstrated. Now, of course, the job is not done. Don't be so callous as to assume that Graham Plattner will coast off into an easy victory. The Republican Party will probably do everything in its power to make sure Susan Collins remains in that seat. Having said that, however, this is a day of victory.
With Graham Plattner and the other candidates for Senate, too. So obviously, she will not face him on a debate stage.
Graham Plattner has been holding events in many corners of the state, and through his reporting and our coverage of events like these, he has been drawing significant crowds to events like that. Governor Mills has had more controlled environments, more intimate settings with her supporters in the process of this campaign. She was viewed by many as the more establishment candidate. She was recruited to run and had the support of Senate leaders like Chuck Schumer, as Graham Plattner has not received.
This is a huge deal. Don't let anybody act as though this is not a huge deal. Even in my most skeptical moments with Graham Plattner, looking at his background, looking at what he's done, what did I keep telling you? That the silver lining here is the fact that regardless of the red flags that he has, from my estimation, it's very clear that the main base does not care about those things. As a matter of fact, they might even see it as a benefit, the fact that he was a machine gunner and things like that. Give him a lot more legitimacy, a lot more credibility to speak on issues such as war. Many of you said his anti-war sentiments are not to your liking because many of you refuse to grade politicians on a curve, and that's obviously always going to lead you into disappointment. But the reality of the matter is, as I said over and over and over again, in the past, the things that he was advocating for, the things that he's still advocating for, like Medicare for all, saying, that he is anti-Israel from the start, being promoted by Bernie Sanders off the rip. Like, these were all early green flags for the Bernie-crat wing, for the left flank candidacies that are propping up in primaries all around the country. So every single victory of this sort is going to be good.
Senator, your reaction to the Mills news?
Here's Susan Collins, who Graham Plattner is obviously running against in the general. Susan Collins is Madam I'm Concerned. Many of you know her by her name, I'm Concerned, or Mrs. Concerning.
I'm very concerned about the president's comments.
Susan Collins is a moderate Republican, which means nothing, really. It just means that she just keeps saying, oh, I'm very concerned. Whenever Trump is like, I'm going to set off all of our nuclear arsenal and, I don't know, wipe out Estonia off the map, people will go to Susan Collins and be like, ma'am, what do you feel? How do you feel about this? And she'll say, I'm concerned, okay? No matter how insane Donald Trump gets, she will always say, look, I'm very concerned, but I'm going to have to vote for whatever whatever Trump is doing. Is he wiping Estonia off the map with nuclear arms? I'm concerned, but I will probably vote for it. Okay? Yeah, she's like the EU of senators. She's just concerned, but stands in line with the party. Yes. Madam, I'm sure he's learned his lesson. That's another one.
I believe that the president has learned from this case.
And Susan Collins has obviously drawn enough ire from the president as well and the MAGA base as well for even demonstrating concern whenever Donald Trump says or does something unbelievably stupid, even if she's a loyal servant of the party when push comes to shove. So she's in this unique predicament and most likely will lose her seat. This is a Republican seat, so this will be a flip. And the reason why that's very important is because I guess you could consider it maybe a purplish state, but it's a red seat, right? It's a Republican seat that will be luckily flipped blue. And what's really interesting about that is that this goes against all of the previous established commentariat talking points. Zoran Mamdani is only popular in a place like New York where everyone is a woke libtard homosexual with a septum ring and a degree in queer biology. No one with Zoran's politics could ever win in a red state. No one with Zoran's politics could ever win in a purple state. Talk to me when someone with Zoran Mamdani's politics ends up winning a red seat. This is what the reasoning has always been from centrist Democrats, claiming that people like AOC, people like Zoran Mamdani, people like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib can only win in deep blue areas. Deep blue areas where the electorate resembles a genderqueer English major that is getting an education in a liberal arts college with 150 other people. Okay? That's not the case. It turns out 65-year-old white ladies and 75-year-old white guys love what Graham Plattner has been serving. Let's take a look at one of these rooms that he's filled. And these are rooms that he has filled all around the state, mind you. Graham Plattner famously has traveled up and down the state of Maine, going into towns with like 100 people and selling out 1,000-person arenas. He has this incredible capability, walking like a chud and thinking like a woke, where he's capable of filling up rooms and arenas in towns where there's just more people attending his speeches than there are people in the town. Turns out people are demanding a progressive mind in a MAGA body, demanding a person who walks like a chud but thinks like a woke, walks like a chud but talks like a woke, whatever you want to call it. Vinny DeBozo says, does no one else find it a bit nuts that Plattner is able to command waves of 65-plus-year-old whites to the rallies where he talks about putting Alito and Thomas in jail and passing Medicare for all by getting rid of the filibuster? Like, this is not a college campus in an urban area. This is Maine 2. People will still do their very best to confirm their priors, okay? You're going to see a big race by the Matt Iglesias constituency, the commentariat that is getting paid by billionaires, millionaires, and the corporate lobbyists to constantly feed that slop over and over again. The idea that, you see, this victory actually doesn't do anything. If anything, it confirms my priors. That's what they're going to say. I'm sure they've already started to say this.
It's about a movement of working Mainers who are fed up with being robbed by billionaires and the politicians who own them.
So Graham Cooks, again, obviously walk like a chud, think like a woke. But of course, Graham Plattner does the graceful thing, the gracious thing.